Okay, perfect. So welcome to the final workshop, academic success workshop of the winter term. This is preparing for finals. Let's dive right into it. So the first thing is we've made an interactive workshop today. So if you've done a workshop with us in the past, you've probably used Menti before. Menti is the software that we like to use so that we can have an interactive workshop. We're going to do some Q&As. We're going to have some open response questions that we want that we would love if everyone could participate in. There's going to be some rank order questions, some voting polls, things like that. So we're going to try to keep it as interactive as possible. So if you had a phone handy, you can go ahead and use the QR code on the right-hand side. You can also go on the website, www.menti.com, input those codes, and then you'll be able to join in on the Menti. So you want to get the most out of this workshop, so you're going to want to get on the Menti page. I'll leave this up here for another minute and give everyone a chance to sign into Menti. Perfect. Looks like we're getting a few more people signing in. If you haven't been able to join the Menti page, we're going to have at the top of your screen, there's going to be instructions for how to get on it a little bit later on. So you can join in a little bit later, but we are going to open with a Menti question right away. So I want to make sure everyone has a chance to sign in using that QR code just now. Alrighty, okay, we're gonna get right into the workshop now. So to start it off, I want to know this open question. So how are you feeling about the last few weeks of the term here, or I guess the last couple of days really, and going into the final exam season? Are you excited? Are you stressed? Are you a little bit of both? What's kind of the feeling that you're having? Once we've had a few answers submitted, I'm gonna hit enter, and then we'll be able to share amongst ourselves how we're feeling. I don't know about you, Sam, but usually going into the exam season, even though for staff members now, I still get stressed out about it. I feel like I just read the room of the entire university. Everyone's clenching a little bit more. I get stressed, you get stressed, we all get stressed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a different kind of vibe on campus when exam season hits. Even just the lines that you see on campus, you'll see are significantly reduced.
Absolutely. So let's see how's everyone so a lot of stress, overwhelmed, nervous, but there's some optimism I'm reading here. I think someone said they're feeling motivated, pretty good. Really excited to get your first year over with. Absolutely. It's kind of a marathon, right? You're in class, you're doing assignments every day, and you finally get a chance to finish up. I've also seen here that there's a couple people who this is your first time doing final exams at the university, so maybe you started in the winter term. Hopefully this workshop, not just for you, but for everyone, gives you some strategies to help you prepare for final exams. And I'll preface it with this. Final exams are always going to be a stressful time of year. You're writing something like 30–50% of your final grade on the last day. It is uncomfortable, but with some good preparation, some good self-care, we think you can get through this a little bit less stressed as you would otherwise, and hopefully a little bit more confident, so that maybe it's not as stressful as an experience as it would have been otherwise. So that said, let's jump right into the content today. So what we have here is this is just a note that if you miss a final exam, so let's say something happens to you on the day of the exam, and you're unable to make it, make sure that you reach out to an academic advisor and your home faculty within 48 hours. So sometimes things happen. Sometimes things happen that impede our ability to attend an exam, right? If that happens, you do need to make sure that you reach out to an academic advisor in your home faculty. If you're not sure what your home faculty is, you can find that information on Aurora. If you're not sure of how to get in contact with your home faculty, so that faculty, Sam is going to send around a link, if he hasn't already, to the academic advising supports, so that you'll be able to see, if I'm in the Faculty of Science, what's the contact information for them. So if an emergency does happen and you're unable to make a final exam, you have an opportunity to connect with your advisor and reach out, asking for a deferred exam based on the circumstance that you've been dealing with. Okay, so with that said, let's talk a little bit about tutors, which can help people prepare and study material throughout the term. Have you accessed the tutor this term, either at the U of M or otherwise? So it looks like we have an early lead for no. That's okay. When I was in university, I did access tutoring, but it wasn't in my first year. It was in my second year, because I don't think I knew about tutoring at the U of M until my second year, which is something that I hear from students all the time. So if that's the position that you're in, we totally understand. Sam, did you ever go to tutoring when you were in university?
Yeah, actually, it was my first semester back in 2014. I went to the Math Help Center to get help with statistics. But at that point, I didn't even know the Academic Learning Center existed. I'd go through Defoe, I'd see the signs for the writing tutors, but I never took the opportunity to do that. And after meeting the lovely writing tutors and the staff there, I absolutely encourage everyone to go and at least go on the Academic Learning Center website for sure to kind of check things out.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that said, that's what this resource card is. And I know it's pretty late in the term right now. We're just kind of getting ready for final exams here. But early next week, if you feel like, hey, there's that one type of problem in my stats course that always messes me up, looking for some specific content tutoring, or maybe it's just kind of having someone talk to you about time management and note-taking strategies or something like that. Just wanted to let everyone know that we do have a tutoring service here at the University of Manitoba. It's free. You can scan the QR code on your screen here to find it, as well as on the same Academic Learning Center webpage that you found this workshop on. So it's also available there. So I'll leave this up here for a second. And again, they can be super helpful. Like Sam mentioned, he went to the Math Help Center to get some tutoring for his stats course. Way back in my university, my second year, I actually went to a writing tutor to help give some feedback on one of my papers I was working on. And that was really helpful for me, especially because I hadn't done any academic writing in my first year. So, even people who are doing really well in courses sometimes reach a tutor so that they go from doing good to great, right? You can always look for some improvements. So definitely wanted to talk about this resource a little bit before we get into some of our strategies here today.
Yeah, and I threw the link in the chat, so you can check it out that way. Just definitely, if you, as soon as you can, go on the website, register for an account, and then from there you can kind of check out how the appointments will work. You'll definitely want to book in advance. I believe they release up to 6 days in advance now. And it's really important that if you have a paper coming up, if you have a test coming up, you want to make sure that you're booking in advance to when those due dates are coming, because as you'll find, those appointments, especially when those due dates are happening, you're not going to be able to find one. It gets really, really busy. So be proactive, keep an eye on things, make your account and check it out sooner as opposed to later.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into some of our main content for today. So we're going to talk about 3 primary strategies to help you prepare for final exams. We're going to have a few more at the end, but these are the big 3 that we're going to work on today. The first one is practice testing. So you see up here. So that's going to be really important because it's been shown in research that practice testing is the single most effective way to prepare for final exams and any type of exam, really. The other two here, distributed practice and interleaving, they're both very similar, and what they are, they relate to time management. So one thing that I've talked to a lot of students about, and if you've met with me in advising before, you'll know I say this all the time. The hardest part of university isn't the coursework. It's managing your time. It's kind of the commitment of a full-time job. You have assignments and exams that are kind of due interwebbed with one another, especially coming into exam week. You might have 2 exams one day after another, so on and so forth. So the course content is one thing, but managing your time and being efficient with your time is half the battle. So that's why we really wanted to highlight these 2 concepts. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail about that as we go here. But to start off, we're going to talk about practice testing. So really, research has shown year after year that the best way to have memory retention and the most effective study strategy is practice testing. Now, one thing that I'll say is it's more effective than just rereading or just rewriting or just highlighting your notes. That isn't to say that those 3 things are not helpful. They generally are. And most times you're going to start off with that. So you're going to look at some of your lecture notes throughout the year. Maybe you haven't looked at them in a few weeks. You're going to want to read those over, maybe rewrite some of those notes, write them a little neater, study them that way. But you don't want to skip out on the practice testing. You want to make sure that you're putting yourself in a situation where you're actively engaging in the material that you're learning. That way, we're going to be looking at what's called active learning as opposed to simply just passive learning, right? So definitely don't be misled by this sentence here. It's not that these things are not helpful. They are, but you don't want to just leave it there. You want to incorporate practice testing as much as you can. Now, you might be wondering, well, how can I do practice testing for my specific course? So for some courses, it's pretty obvious that practice testing is accessible. So maybe you're doing a math course and you got the old tests and the old exams from years past from the bookstore. Well, that's a very, very good resource, and that's a very maybe obvious solution. But there's other types of courses that you might not think of when you think of practice testing, but there are ways to incorporate it. So I'm going to kind of go around this wheel here and talk about some of the different ways that you can do practice testing for different courses. So one of them is solving textbook problems. So if you have a textbook assigned to you for the specific course you're on, usually the textbook has more questions than you know what to do with in there, and usually the answers are at the back of the book. So if you're having a hard time finding some old tests, or maybe you've already done the old tests, you've done your midterm again, you've done all those quizzes your prof gave you, you want some more practice, especially if it's an area you're a little weaker in, finding some problems in the textbook would be a good way. Now, this is one that we get a lot. So maybe a student, maybe you're in an English course or a history course, and you have to write a paper, or you have to write a paragraph or 2 in the actual final exam. How do you prepare for that? Well, one thing that you can do is you can try to replicate that feeling of a timed essay in your practice. A good place to get some potential essay topics would be, maybe you were assigned earlier in the year an assignment where you got to choose from 4 or 5 different essay topics and you chose one. Well, what you could do is you could do a timed essay for one of the other topics that you didn't end up selecting. Of course, you wouldn't go into the same detail as you would if you were actively, finding quotes and things like that, but you can really replicate needing to be familiar with those texts or whatever the case may be, that material, and using that to write a timed essay. Another type is flashcards and quizzing your friends, or having your friends quiz you. So maybe your course has a lot of memorization or a lot of word association to do with it. I'm thinking of a bio course potentially. You can use flashcards that you make when you're going through the textbook or going through your notes, and using that and then forcing yourself to kind of answer those questions. That is definitely a form of testing yourself. And I think flashcards are something that come pretty natural to people. A lot of people are pretty familiar with using those, and I definitely encourage people to continue using those. And the last one, we're actually going to go into more detail a little bit later on, but if you're having a hard time really remembering what you need to be studying in the course, you can turn the headings in the course syllabus or the course outline, or even the textbook, into a question. So you might see that there was a learning outcome in one of your courses. For chapter 1, your learning outcome is to master a certain concept. You can ask yourself a question based on that heading to make sure that you have the understanding, any related definitions, any related examples pertaining to that piece. So I know that that might be kind of complicated sounding right now. We're gonna show a written out example later on in the workshop. Okay, so now we're going to talk about not just the importance of doing practice testing, but making sure that you're, if possible, matching your studying, so the way you're practicing, with how you'll be assessed on the final exam. So for example, let's say you know that your final exam is going to be multiple choice based. Well, as much as you can help it, you want to make sure that you're doing questions that are multiple choice. And this is kind of like what I was talking about earlier. How would you practice for doing an essay in an hour? Well, a good way to practice would be to do an essay in an hour in an environment that's quiet, without the text with you, with a firm knowledge of the texts. You want to replicate as much as possible the types of things that you'll be tested on the exam in your practice. Sam, did you want to jump in on that point there?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that really upgraded my testing abilities, specifically when it came to like things like multiple choice testing, which is a lot of the kind of testing format that a lot of the classes I took in university kind of did, was keeping that time constraints on me even when I was practicing, because it kind of helped me replicate those test settings. And when I got to the test, I kind of had a structure laid out about how I was going to kind of manage my time. And it really helped me kind of make sure that I was answering the questions I knew, and spent the most time on those ones versus the ones I didn't know so much. I would say those kind of towards the end, and any of my leftover time I could spend towards that.
Yeah, and to kind of build off that, I think that not only is that a good strategy to write a good exam, that's a good strategy to do when you're testing. So instead of you're doing a practice quiz or a practice midterm in preparation for your final, maybe there were a few questions that you circled and you didn't know. Maybe move on from those while you're doing your practice, and then go back to them in your studying, because those are the things that on the exam you wouldn't have known, right? So it's another advantage of making sure that you're doing your practice in the same way as what it's going to be on the exam, because it's going to outline, what types of questions am I strong at? What types of questions am I not so strong at? And maybe I can address these weaknesses in advance of the final exam. Okay, so enough selling practice testing. We know that that's important. I'm kind of curious now. What kind of exams do you have upcoming? Well, what is everyone writing this term? My early prediction is that multiple choice is going to be the winner, because I believe that that is the most popular type of final exam. And everyone's least favorite as well. I think everyone starts off liking multiple choice, but then you start realizing how tricky they can get and how similar some of the answers sound. You got to be so detail oriented. So I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with multiple choice exams. I don't know. What about you, Sam?
Yeah, definitely more of the multiple choice exams as well. But I did have my fair share of short answer and long answer questions as well. And same with timed essay questions, as well as some problem solving and, open book and take home. Like throughout my university career, you have so many opportunities to kind of take different classes, and different information requires different formatting of testing. So, it's really good to know kind of what kind of test you're stepping into, like Thomas has been saying. That way you can practice beforehand, set those parameters up so that you have more of a familiarity with those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about practice testing, different ways you can do practice testing, matching the style of your final exam to the style that you're doing when you're doing your practice testing. Now let's talk about the time management piece, which is, I think, the other half of preparing for exams and really just surviving university. So I have an obvious message on the screen here. So I say don't cram. And I know for many students, and especially if you're newer into university, cramming is really the only way that you know how to study. And I'll say this right now, I've crammed for many exams in my university career. Now, it is not the most effective form of studying, or rather form of time management. That might be obvious, but one thing that we hear a lot, and one thing that I've heard a lot when I was in university is, don't cram. Cramming is not helpful. You're going to tire yourself out. But I hadn't learned any actual alternatives to cramming. All I really knew was setting up shop in the library, opening my laptop for 5 hours, saying I'm going to study for anatomy, and then not leaving until I finish studying for anatomy. But I wasn't really offered any type of alternatives to that style of studying. So I'm hopefully going to provide you some context for ways that you can, yes, accomplish the same amount of things, but in a way that's a little bit more effective and a little bit more brain friendly. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's called distributed practice. So distributed practice also takes time. It takes effortful studying. It's not the answer that relieves all stress from final exams, but what it can do is it can leave you feeling a little bit sharper going into your final exams. It can allow you to manage your motivation and your procrastination. Now, if you were planning on spending 5 hours in a row studying anatomy, I'm going to gather that your first hour would be productive, your second hour will be hit or miss, and your third hour you'll be on your phone. And that's not a fault to anyone. That's just because the human brain can't really concentrate for that long, right? So distributed practice really takes into account the fact of that reality, and it forces you to take intentional breaks in the middle of concerted effort study periods. So for example, here, this is a student who, they have some exams coming up. Instead of spending all day on Wednesday studying for their anatomy exam, they might study for their anatomy for about half hour, 45 minutes, cycle to another subject. Maybe they come back to anatomy in another chapter a little bit later on. And what they're really avoiding by doing that is they're avoiding having a lull period where they're really stressed, they're really frustrated, they're kind of scrolling on their phone because they're feeling so stressed, because they set themselves up to do 5 hours of that course. So distributed practice really avoids that. It's a little bit more brain friendly in the sense of, your brain can definitely do half hour, 45 minutes of a certain field of study. Maybe you write out a very reasonable goal to cover chapter 1's cue cards instead of saying cover all of the cue cards. It's a little bit more of a bite-sized chunk. And the other thing, by doing that, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, you can identify what part of the course you're very strong in and which part of the course really needs some more attention, so that when maybe in another hour or two, when you come back to that course, preparing for that exam, you know exactly where you need to be spending your attention, as opposed to maybe spinning your wheels on one type of course and really losing momentum. So especially when it comes to having just a limited amount of time in your exam week, we know that there's going to be exams that are pretty close together. You want to really take advantage of keeping your mind as sharp as possible, putting in some small breaks, 5 to 10 minutes, keeping yourself sharp and not getting stuck in a period of really just wasting time. So with that said, we probably gave this answer away. So I'm wondering for you, would you rather spend 3 hours studying one subject, or would you rather spend 1 hour studying 3 subjects?
One thing that really helped me with, being able to keep up in my classes and keep myself interested in the courses was going from that, block chunking into distributive practice.
Winner. Perfect.
There you
Okay,
go.
so I'm glad that we're all in agreement. Now, I know that it's pretty natural to, especially when the pressure gets a little bit higher, to start cramming a little bit, and that's okay if you find yourself cramming and getting really frustrated. I hope you just you can think back to this workshop. You can think about, okay, maybe I can write down exactly what I want to accomplish and break it up into chunks. Break it up into chunks that can be done in a half an hour or 45 minutes, or even an hour, a time frame where you know you're not going to overexhaust yourself, but you would be satisfied to know that you got a considerable amount of work done in that time period. So again, this is really not making, you don't make more time in the day. That's it's impossible. But what you can do, what we're really looking at here is effective, efficient studying. A big difference for me between my first couple of years in university and my last couple of years of university was just efficiency. I would say there was a lot of time, especially earlier on in my university career, spent just spinning my wheels and getting really frustrated, staying at campus really late without really getting much done. Whereas a little bit later on in my university degree, I took advantage of small half-hour, 45-minute time periods that I might have. I used to think, and I know a lot of students think that, well, I only have half an hour or 45 minutes until my bus comes. Not really much you can do. Well, there's a lot you can do. You can make the most of a half an hour, and yeah, you won't be able to master an entire subject in a half an hour, but you can probably get one chapter done. So again, it's really just making the most of the time that you have in the note of efficiency. Okay, so before we jump into our last primary study strategy that we're going to go into, I did want to mention that it's just around 4 o'clock now, and I know originally we were planning to get this workshop done by 4, but we had some technical issues, so we couldn't really start until 3:30. But if you do have other commitments that you got to get to now that it's 4 o'clock, I totally understand. We are recording this, so you'll be able to watch this a little bit later on. Though if you do have the time and you're wanting to stay with us, feel free to do so. And we'll also have a question and answer period towards the end, closer to 4:30. So if you did have some questions on your mind, keep those in your back pocket. We're going to open the floor up to everyone a little bit later on. Okay, so we're going to talk about interleaving. Now, interleaving is very similar to distributed practice, but what it does is it emphasizes the variety of studying not just different subjects, but different types of problems within a subject. And what that's going to do is it's really going to keep your mind sharp, and it's really going to challenge yourself. And of course, outline what types of problems you're strong at and what type of problems need some work. So let's go into some examples here. On the left-hand side, we have someone who they're going to do an hour of a workout, but they're going to do the same exercise over and over again. Now, we're going to compare that with, on the right side, someone who's going to do what's called interleaving. Well, they're going to do a whole body workout. They're going to do, the sit-ups exercises. They're also going to do the dumbbells. They're going to take some time for water. They're going to do the kettlebells and whatever this exercise is, the plank, I guess. So they're going to do a whole variety of things. That's good. And they're going to get kind of an entire body workout. Now, that we're not here to talk about preparing for a workout. We're here to talk about preparing for a final exam, but it's kind of the same thing in this sense, isn't it? It's a good example, right? Because if we want to prepare for a final exam for a course, yeah, it might be helpful to do one type of problem, but we don't want to get stuck doing one type of problem the entire time. We want to cycle through different parts of the course and challenge ourselves in different ways. And that's going to keep our brains feeling super sharp and feeling, of course, prepared for different types of questions. So that's something that I think a lot of students overlook, and it can be really helpful. So I've listed here, this particular student, they're either going to do interleaving, in which they do maybe about half an hour in this course, half an hour in this course, so on and so forth, versus, let's say, 2 hours in this course. And then they're going to do 2 hours in the stats course. And then they're going to do 2 hours in another course. The contrast to that is doing half an hour each, and then cycling through that so that you hit the same amount of time spent on each course. So this isn't to say that you're only going to spend half an hour on this course versus 2. You're going to spend, you're just going to repeat this cycle a couple of times. Now, what has been found is interleaving in this way has been shown to be so much more effective, because you're going to be very inefficient if you're studying in a 2 or a 3 hour time block for just one particular course. Now you might be productive at the get-go, but what happens if you get stuck on a certain type of problem? So maybe you're doing a stats course and you're really spinning your wheels on a certain type of problem, and you spend a half an hour, 45 minutes getting really frustrated about it, and then you end up on your phone. It's not a good situation. Well, blocked practice can really leave you vulnerable to that situation. Something like interleaving, where you're forcing yourself to have a starting point and an ending point in your work, you're going to be able to move on from that and come back to it with a fresh mind after accomplishing productive work in some of your other courses. So again, we're not adding more time to the day. We're just really making the most of the time that we do have. Same thing can be done in the actual course itself. So maybe we're looking at like a Math 1300 course. That's the example we've listed. I'll tell you right now, I haven't done Math 1300 in a really long time, and I barely know what these things are. But if you are in a math course, you probably have seen these things before. So instead of just really spinning our wheels out on one type of problem and then doing a large chunk of another type of problem, so that's that blocked practice. Well, what if we interleave different types of problems and then just came back to and cycled through the other units a little bit later on? What that's going to do is that's going to keep our brains sharp, our focus high. And again, if there's something that we're not so strong at, we know we need to spend extra attention on that. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about practice questions, how to do practice for your exams. We've talked about using distributed practice instead of cramming. We also talked about doing interleaving and adding variety to our studying, but it is inevitable that you're going to find yourself struggling at some points. You might find yourself getting distracted. What do you do to help you regain your focus? Is there anything that you found to be really helpful? Me and Sam are going to share some things that we've found, but we want to hear from you. What do you like to do to kind of help you get back on track if things are kind of going astray? All right, so it looks like a number of people have submitted an answer. I'm gonna hold off for a couple more minutes, let everyone finish typing, and then let's see what kind of strategies we've found. Okay, so let's see. So it looks like some people, so taking a walk, yeah, that can be a great strategy. I generally do that.
Yeah.
Sleep, have a little nap, never a bad idea.
Take a small break. That's good. Distractions.
Hide anything that causes distraction. That's a really good one. And I think that it's easy to kind of overlook, but when we are doing active thinking and we start getting tired, it's really easy to look for something that's going to be a little bit more passive. For a lot of us, that's going to be our phones, right? It's very easy to start, I'm just going to go on social media for a couple minutes. Well, a couple minutes, yeah, that's going to turn into 20, 30 minutes, right? We know that that's going to happen. So definitely knowing, okay, I've been doing some effortful studying. I'm starting to get distracted. Let's get rid of those distractions as best as possible. Let's program some breaks into our studying, and then we'll check those things as well. I know someone even mentioned that very same point. And that could be the other advantage of doing a study period in like 20 or 30 minutes. So what sometimes I'll do is I'll do 30 minutes of good work, and then I'll do, play on my phone or whatever for 5-10 minutes afterwards. So it's much more effective to do that, and you kind of leave that distraction off your mind because you're going to have time to go on your phone a little bit later on. That you're going to have that. Whereas if you say I'm going to study for 5 hours, it's kind of unreasonable to expect that out of yourself, to not get distracted in that amount of time.
Yeah, and sometimes you're just staring at your computer or your textbook for an hour, right? You need to take a break. You need to give your eyes some time to refocus and readjust. So going for a walk, going for a cup of coffee, especially right now, it's a perfect thing to do.
Yeah, so hopefully we don't get any more snow this year and ruin all the sidewalks, but for now, for a while we have it. Have a nice walk and play music or an instrumental music. That reminds me, one thing I like to share with students is when it's time to get some work done or I need to be productive, I'll just throw in on a jazz music playlist or a lo-fi music playlist, something in the background that I know that when that's on, I feel a lot more productive, and I feel like it's kind of inducing myself to be productive, as opposed to maybe something else that I might be listening to that doesn't really remind myself of productivity. So that's kind of what that also works for me.
Yeah, you don't want anything too distracting. So I sometimes I used to try and study with the podcast on until I just realized, I was focusing too much on the podcast, and that was my study time. So switching to the instrumental, doing the jazz, I feel like it's a good strategy.
Yeah, so that kind of concludes the main practice testing, distributed practice, interleaving that we wanted to talk about. But there are some other strategies that we're going to go over. So we're going to talk about making the most out of your course syllabus or your course outline. We're going to talk about diffuse mode and focus mode, which we'll explain a little bit later. We're going to talk a little bit about self-care as well. So using your course outline, so that many of you, you might have been in an anthropology course, or whether you have or not, this is an example that might be helpful for you. So your course will have a syllabus or an outline that will outline all of the different pieces that's going to be important for your course. So for example, in this course, it was important that students had a brief history of the culture concept. Well, what you can do is you can turn something like this into a question, and say, what is a brief history of the culture concept? Provide a definition and an example. And you can prompt yourself to make sure that you're reaching all of these different outcomes by asking yourself a question on that. Another good way to do that is when you're summarizing your notes and you're looking at the notes you took way back in January or February, you can use the course syllabus or the course outline to frame some questions, and you can examine your notes for those answers and rewrite them. So that way you're not just reading your notes in a passive sense, you're actively looking through your notes and forming those connections by asking yourself that question. So that's something that that I wouldn't have thought of right away, but it's something that you can use to help give you some guidance. Let's say you're in a course that there isn't a study guide and there's no real tangible practice testing strategies for this course. This could be a quick little way to make yourself a study guide, because it is in fact the outcomes that are supposed to be covered in the course. Here's another example of a student that's kind of making a study checklist for a chemistry course. So what they're doing is they're looking at the information for one section of the course, and then they're giving themselves resources to understand this material and action items to make sure that they're able to adequately use the material that they found in these textbook chapters. So that can be another strategy. Again, maybe you're not really sure where to find practice material or how to find practice material. You can use this and you can create different action items based off of those things to make sure that come the exam time, you're able to do the things that you're kind of set out to do. And now another piece about getting frustrated or having a rough go when it comes to studying is tapping into your diffuse mode. So we're going to talk a little bit about diffuse mode and focus mode in a second. So focus mode is mostly what we've been talking about today. So that's that active reading, that's doing practice testing, that's doing that concentrated effort for half an hour instead of, or before taking a break. Anything that's really mentally effortful where you're actually doing intentional studying, that's what we're going to call focus mode. Now, diffuse mode is a little bit different. Diffuse mode is where you're taking a break, or maybe you're taking some time away from your studying to recharge. Your brain doesn't completely shut off when you're in diffuse mode. So if you're like me, sometimes you're driving home from an exam or something, and then, all of a sudden you have the answer to a problem that you were stuck on. Or maybe you figured out the answer to a question while you were in the shower because your brain was still going on it. So that's kind of what we're getting at when we're talking about diffuse mode. And as you are studying for a lot of different courses, there's going to be some fatigue. There's going to be some times where you need to work on or do some self-care. Using that to your advantage and called diffuse mode can be super helpful for you. Okay, so we want to know a little bit about what you like to do when it's time to take a break or time to take some time to recharge. And then Sam, if you wanted to give some examples on what do you like to do when you're feeling a little bit tired or you need to recharge.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I just need a second to myself, just not really think about anything, to toss on some video games, play those for a little bit, then get right back to it. Another activity that I used to do to break up the studying during the day when I was on campus was I would pack up my books and then I go to the gym and get some exercise done. And then I come out feeling a lot more refreshed. Another big thing when it's a little bit warmer out as well is taking a walk, going to, getting some fresh air. It really helps me clear my mind. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same. I see video games on there as well. Fantastic. Drink water and have a snack. You have to stay hydrated. That's really important. Sometimes it's good to lay off the coffee and have a cup of water or something like that. Working out, sleep, eat, watch a movie. Fantastic ideas as well. Throw on a show or something like that.
Yeah, really just something to keep your mind off of things. And who knows, maybe doing those things, maybe you're tapping into your diffuse mode and you're still thinking about what you're working on, or maybe you're flat out just taking a break from your studying, recharging, for example, lifting weights. Yeah, maybe that's something that for you, it allows you to come back feeling energized, relieve some stress, really take yourself out of the situation of studying and then coming back to it later. Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what type of studying or best ways to do your studying and your time management. Now we want to think a little bit about where you like to do your studying. Now I have my own opinions on this, and I'm sure Sam does as well. We want to know from you, where do you like doing your studying and where do you dislike doing your studying? So feel free to use this. I believe it's like a sliding scale that you can do strongly disagree or strongly agree or somewhere in the middle. So if you go on Menti, you can vote on the different types of ways. We also have other on there. Now, other is a weird one. I'm not sure how you vote on other because I'm not entirely sure what other is. But I can think of some other. Maybe you want to study on the bus a little bit. Maybe you're looking at the lecture slides on your phone. Maybe that's something you do. I know I've done that when I was in university. Can't say that I particularly enjoyed it. But let's see where most people like to do their studying.
Yeah, even if you're I used to do this as well, just on a break at work, get 15 minutes in, feel a little better getting some chapters some chapters done while you're at work. That way, when you go home, less to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was in university, I tried to do almost everything that I needed to do on campus before I left home, even if that meant staying for another 45 minutes to an hour, just because A, I lived really far from campus, and B, I wanted to really have that separation between home and the school. I found that was really helpful for me. Of course, that got flipped upside down a little bit when the COVID pandemic hit.
Yeah.
But essentially that's one strategy that really helped me push myself to be effective while on campus, compared to relying on being at home. So it looks like a lot of folks really like the library studying, at least to some degree. There's a few people who don't mind studying at home, and home can be productive as well. I think for a lot of people, there's a lot more distractions at home, so so a little bit more intentional when it comes to mitigating those distractions, like making sure we're not popping on Netflix, things like that. Can really help. Not a lot of fans of studying in a cafe, and I kind of agree with this. I always find myself like getting really distracted. I'm very sensitive to sounds when I'm studying. So like hearing background chatter, I know for some people it's like white noise, but for me it's incredibly distracting. So really the quieter and the more controlled, the better. So if the sound is coming from one speaker playing jazz music, that's pretty okay for me. But if noise is coming from a whole bunch of different people, my brain tries to pick it apart, and yeah, let's just say it could be pretty distracting. And it looks like a lot of people aren't a big fan of studying in cafes too much. But I do know some people who they don't mind a little bit of Starbucks studying. So it really is, there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. It's about finding a place that consistently is productive for you, that you feel comfortable, but you feel focused, right? Okay, so we're pretty much done the tips for studying now. So we're going to talk about a couple of resources that might be helpful, both for this term, but as well for other terms at the university. So you know that there's a lot of different libraries here on campus, but you might not know how to make the most of your libraries. So for instance, did you know that there's actually a librarian specializing in each different subject? So there's a librarian that specializes in history, for example. So if you're doing a history course and you're having a hard time finding sources, or you're not really sure where to look or make the most out of it, you can actually make an appointment with a certain with the librarian specializing in that subject. So Sam, if you want to go ahead, or if you've done it already, just list the link to the library resources, something that you can take advantage of leading into exam season or even in a later term. I've also, there's a QR code that you can scan here that will take you to the page where you find your actual subject librarian. They also have a whole bunch of other things too in the library. Sorry to cut you off, Sam. They do workshops as well, much like we do. So if there's a certain piece of information you're looking for, or something that you struggle with, potentially citing sources or whatever the case may be, you can have a look to see if they have any upcoming workshops or videos sort of pertaining to those things in the library.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to talk about. Well, specifically is their YouTube channel, because they have a ton of different tutorials that are very informative. So definitely go check them out.
Absolutely. So I also wanted to make a note for some of the other workshops that we've done this year. So if this is the first academic success workshop you're coming to, welcome. If you've been to some of these other ones, I'm glad that you've chosen to come to this one as well. Most of these we have recordings available. So if there's an area such as creating a study schedule, really focuses on time management. If you wanted to do an even further deep dive into your time management skills, absolutely go ahead and check out this workshop. We have that recorded. We also have done many of these in the fall term as well. We have recordings for those ones too available on our website. So make sure that you go check out some of those workshops. And even next year, when you're coming back to school, maybe you're taking the summer term off and you want to get back in the swing of things, you can absolutely come and sign up for our workshops again next year, and really get yourself in the mindset ready for school. Now, we've reached the point of the workshop where I want to know if you have any advice that you want to give your fellow students about preparing for exams. So any study strategies that works for you, that you have, either the ones that we've talked about today or ones that you just already know. Feel free to share that with with your classmates and with us, and we would love to hear what you do that is working for you. Okay, it looks like we got a couple answers. I'm going to show those, and you can keep submitting some answers. Active recall. So I guess that's taking into account like actually quizzing yourself on material, I'm gathering. Don't be hard on yourself. Absolutely. Exams are hard. There's no way around that. You know, even when you're managing your time well and you're being very efficient with your time, exams are stressful and exams are difficult. So be kind to yourself and don't be so don't be too hard on yourself. And absolutely. And start studying as soon as possible. Yeah. Even now, like we're going into a long weekend, and I know a lot of us have some family things going on this weekend. But if you can take some time to start getting ready for final exams, that could make next week much less stressful and much more approachable, even if it is just making a checklist of all the different areas that you got to study in each of your courses. That can be a great way to start your exam season and getting you organized.
Absolutely. Even just like self-reflecting on the semester, maybe there's some different chapters or portions that you maybe found a little bit more difficult that you know are going to be significant on the exam. It's good to recognize those areas so that, you know, you're putting the effort where it needs to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are all really good. And asking for help. Yeah, absolutely. You know, if there's a part of the course that has been challenging, like Sam has mentioned, maybe talk to your instructor in office hours or send them an email to see if they can provide a little bit more clarity. There's a lot of resources and a lot of people here to help you at the university. You really just got to ask for it. Okay, so now we're pretty much at the end of our workshop. I would greatly appreciate it if you could fill out our survey. There's only a few questions on there. So the QR code you see on the left-hand side, that's going to link you to the survey. We also have a link here that you can just click on if you wanted to do our survey. I'll leave this up for a couple minutes. Now, I know we had some technical issues today. We had to start our workshop a little later. And we do apologize about that. So we do know about that issue already. Here, I'm actually just going to go ahead and stop recording this one.